The jewelry box that broke Jake Reiner. When Jake Reiner opened the jewelry box, he wasn't looking for answers. He was just trying to feel close to his father, Rob Reiner, the man the world adored, the man Jake thought he knew. But grief does strange things. It clouds the mind. It sharpens the senses. And in the hours after his father and stepmother were found brutally stabbed inside their Brentwood estate, Jake was numb. He wandered the halls of the mansion like a ghost in a tomb. Quiet. Shaking. Then something caught his eye. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. A drawer, slightly ajar behind a wall of books in Rob's private study. Jake pulled. It didn't slide open easily. It creaked, like it hadn't been touched in years. Inside, a small, velvet-lined jewelry box. The kind you'd find in a grandmother's closet, maybe. The kind that's supposed to hold memories, not secrets. He opened it. And what he found left him breathless. What was in that box? A wedding ring. But not the one Rob gave Michelle. This one was old. Gold, with a delicate engraving on the inside. To R. Forever, L. Jake's hands began to tremble. Who was L? Why had Rob kept this? Hidden it? And then Jake saw the photograph, tucked beneath the ring. Worn, faded, almost sepia-toned. A younger Rob, smiling, at the beach, standing beside a woman Jake had never seen before, in a wedding dress. A second marriage? No, a first marriage. A secret marriage. Jake stared at the woman's face, the soft curls around her cheeks, the joyful grin that mirrored the one his father wore in every public appearance. But this wasn't Hollywood. This wasn't staged. This was real. And it was hidden. But why? Why was it hidden? And why did Jake find it now, after his father and Michelle had been murdered in what the press was calling a domestic massacre? Let's rewind. Just 48 hours earlier, everything seemed normal. Rob Reiner, 78, and his wife Michelle, 70, were hosting a quiet dinner at home. Their son Nick, 32, was living in the guest house. Reports say nothing unusual happened that day. No calls to 911. No security alarms. Nothing. But by Sunday night, both Rob and Michelle were dead, stabbed multiple times in what authorities described as a high-intensity, rage-driven attack. Their daughter Romy, 27, was the one who discovered them. And here's where it starts getting strange. Because Romy didn't just call for help. She reportedly told the police something that sent chills through the responding officers. There's someone dangerous in this family, and he should be a suspect. Hours later, her brother Nick was arrested. Not for suspicion, not for questioning. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. No hesitation, no bail, no doubt. At least, not from the LAPD. But from Jake? Everything was doubt. Jake didn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. Sure, Nick had a troubled past. He'd battled addiction. He'd been in and out of rehab. There were incidents, yes. Moments of rage. Darkness. But murder? His own parents? Jake couldn't accept it. Something was missing. So while reporters swarmed the gate outside, while detectives combed the scene for evidence, Jake went inside. To find something. Anything. Closure. Comfort. Maybe a journal entry or an old voicemail. Instead, he found a bombshell. The jewelry box. It didn't look like much. Certainly not something that could rip a family apart. But that's the thing about secrets. They hide in plain sight. And inside that box, Jake found more than just a ring and a photo. He found a question. A question that would haunt him. Did my father have another life? Another wife? Another child? Jake didn't want to believe it. But once you ask that kind of question, it's like pulling a thread on a sweater. You have to keep pulling, even if everything unravels. Let's talk about Rob Reiner for a moment. To the world, he was meathead turned maestro. From the sitcoms of the 70s to the Hollywood blockbusters of the 80s and 90s, Rob Reiner was a legend. Stand By Me, The Princess Bride, A Few Good Men. He was the kind of man who got standing ovations at film festivals and Father of the Year nods from fans. He and Michelle seemed like a power couple. Quiet, mature, respectable. They weren't tabloid fodder. They didn't scream scandal. And yet, this jewelry box told a different story. A private story. One Rob never meant to share. But why? What was he hiding? And more importantly, what did it have to do with the murders? Because make no mistake, this wasn't just sentimental. The ring wasn't just a memento from a college fling. This was a wedding ring. Engraved. Preserved. Hidden with care. And the woman in the photo? She wasn't some unknown extra or fan. She meant something. You could see it in Rob's eyes. He loved her. He loved her in a way that felt different, less polished, less filtered, more real. So why didn't anyone in the Reiner family know who she was? Why wasn't she in the biographies? Why wasn't she ever mentioned? Jake had questions, but no answers. Not yet. Here's where things start to twist. Jake showed the ring and photo to Romy. She froze. Then she whispered, "That's her. That's the woman in the dream." Jake was confused. Romy explained that since she was a kid, she'd have this recurring dream, a beach, a woman in white, calling her name. Softly, gently. She thought it was a guardian angel. Now she wasn't so sure. She thought maybe, just maybe, it was her mother's ghost. Only Michelle wasn't dead then. And this woman? This woman wasn't Michelle. This woman was someone else. A secret marriage. A secret ring. A woman in a photo. It didn't make sense. Until Jake started digging. And what he found would lead him down a path filled with more secrets, more lies, and more danger than he ever expected. A sealed birth certificate. A forgotten actress. A diary entry from Michelle, never sent. A voicemail from a nurse. A second ring. And a buried truth Rob Reiner took to his grave. Until Jake unearthed it. Literally. But why does this matter now? Why does a decades-old secret marriage mean anything after such a brutal, senseless tragedy? Because maybe, just maybe, the motive for Rob and Michelle's murder didn't come from money, or drugs, or mental illness. Maybe it came from the past, from a promise broken, a family divided, a son forgotten, a brother hidden, a second son desperate for answers. This is not just a murder story. This is a story about identity, about family, about the lies we tell to protect those we love, and the ones we tell to protect ourselves. It's about legacy and the cost of secrets. And what happens when one man's buried past threatens to tear apart everything he built? Because Jake didn't just find a ring in that box. He found the first clue in a mystery that spanned decades. And once he opened that door, he couldn't shut it again, even when it led him to someone he never knew existed. Someone who might have been the real reason behind the bloodshed. And as for Nick, Jake still wasn't ready to believe his brother did it. But the deeper he dug, the more Nick's name kept coming up. Nick had been in the study. Nick had access to Rob's files. Nick had grown erratic in the weeks leading up to the murders. And when Jake found another jewelry box in Nick's room, this one empty, he had to ask himself, was Nick trying to find the same truth? Or was he trying to destroy it? One thing was clear. That ring, that photo, that box, they were just the beginning. And what Jake was about to find would make the murders look like just one piece of a much darker puzzle. Because what happens when you find out the father you admired was living a lie? What happens when you meet the brother you never knew existed? What happens when everything you thought was true crashes into everything you were never told? Jake Reiner was about to find out. And what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. Who do you call when your world splits in half? Not a lawyer. Not a therapist. You call the police. That's exactly what Romy Reiner did when she stepped into her parents' Brentwood mansion that Sunday morning. She wasn't expecting chaos, just brunch. She had fresh bagels in hand, her usual Sunday ritual with her mother, Michelle. The security gate was open, a little strange, but not alarming. Maybe Nick had forgotten to close it again. She walked through the front door, then stopped. Silence. No smell of coffee. No music from the kitchen radio. Just silence. And something else. Something heavier. The kind of stillness that feels watched. Ever felt that? Like someone's breath is hovering just behind you? Romy knew something was wrong. She called out, "Mom." No answer. "Dad." Still nothing. The bag of bagels slipped from her hand. They hit the tile with a soft thud, scattering like her heartbeats. Then she saw the blood. It started as a smear on the hallway wall. At first, she thought maybe someone spilled wine. Deep red, dripping slow. But wine doesn't pool under door frames. She pushed open the bedroom door. And that's when she screamed. Rob and Michelle Reiner were both on the floor, lifeless. Their bodies told a story no one wanted to read. Multiple stab wounds. Defensive cuts on their hands. Rob's fingers still curled like he was trying to shield someone, maybe Michelle. And the most haunting detail? Rob's eyes. Wide open. Staring at the ceiling. Frozen. Like he saw someone he never expected to hurt him. Romy ran out. Called 911. Screaming, sobbing. But then, right in the middle of hysteria, she said something else. Something the dispatcher flagged immediately. There's someone dangerous in this family. He should be a suspect. She didn't name him, but she didn't have to. The police knew who she meant. So did Jake. Nick. Here's where the story splits in two. Because from the outside, it's easy to believe what the headlines say. Troubled son arrested in brutal murder of Hollywood legend and wife. Nick Reiner, 32, faces first-degree murder charges in shocking double homicide. Tragic end to Rob Reiner's storybook life. But the truth? It's never so neat. Jake didn't believe it. Not for a second. Nick had his issues. Rehab, anger, unresolved trauma. But murder? No, that wasn't Nick. At least, it hadn't been. But there was one thing that kept Jake up at night. What if someone pushed Nick over the edge? What if the truth Jake was chasing was the same truth that got his parents killed? Let's rewind to that day. While Romy was giving her statement to the police, Jake arrived. He was out of town when the murders happened, at a film conference in Seattle. His phone had been on silent. When he finally checked it, there were 14 missed calls from Romy, 2 voicemails, and 1 text that chilled him. Come home now. They're gone. It's Nick. I swear. Jake didn't even pack. He booked the next flight. Landed in LA at 2:12 a.m. By 3 a.m. he was standing outside the Brentwood mansion, flashing his ID to the officers at the scene. They let him through. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a crime scene. But worse than that, it felt like a graveyard. Not just because Rob and Michelle had died there, but because something else had, too. Trust. The smell of iron still clung to the air. Blood has a way of sticking to the walls. Not just physically, but emotionally. It lingers in the soul. Jake walked through the hallways, memories swirling with each step. Birthday parties, Sunday movies, Dad falling asleep during his own film screening. Gone. All gone. He stood in the study. This was Rob's favorite room. Shelves lined with scripts, film awards, letters from famous directors. It should have felt warm. But now it felt cold. Hollow. And then Jake noticed something. One of the books on the shelf, Misery by Stephen King, was pushed in deeper than the rest. Like it had been shoved too hard. He pulled on it. It clicked. A false panel. Behind it, a small, dusty drawer. And inside that drawer, the velvet-lined jewelry box. Jake didn't open it yet. Not right away. He stared at it for a full minute. Why would his father, Mr. Open Book, Mr. I have nothing to hide, have this stashed behind a trick panel? He sat down, opened it, and the world shifted. We've already talked about what he found. The ring, the engraving, the photograph, the smile. But what we haven't talked about is what it meant. Because this wasn't just evidence of an affair. This was evidence of another life. Jake flipped the photo over. A date, March 14th, 1974. And a name, scribbled in cursive, Lena. Who was Lena? Why had she been married to Rob? Why was her name a ghost in this house? And more importantly, where was she now? Dead? Alive? And what did she have to do with any of this? Romy knew the moment she saw the ring that it was serious. She told Jake about the dreams, the visions, the beach, the woman. It sounded insane. Until it didn't. Because when you lose your parents in one night, when your brother is locked in a cell, you start looking for signs everywhere. And sometimes, they start looking back. The next morning, Jake took the photo and ring to a private investigator he trusted, someone who worked off the books. No police. No leaks. He wanted answers, not headlines. The PI scanned the photo, ran facial recognition. And after an hour of silence, she turned to Jake and said, "We have a match. Lena Roth, actress, disappeared in 1976. Presumed dead. No body ever found." Jake blinked. Romy gasped. Lena Roth, a name not spoken in decades. A woman erased from history, but not from Rob's heart. This is where things turn from strange to terrifying. Because the moment Jake searched Lena Roth's name online, someone hacked into his home Wi-Fi. His devices started glitching. A threatening message flashed across his laptop screen. "Stop digging, or you'll end up like them." He showed Romy. She went pale. Who would do that? Nick was in custody. Unless he wasn't working alone. Jake didn't stop. He couldn't. Because somewhere in this mess, this blood-soaked mansion, this buried past, this ring with a ghost's name on it, was the truth. And the truth? It doesn't care how famous you are. It doesn't care how many Oscars you've won. It comes for everyone. Even the Reiners. Especially the Reiners. But as Jake stood in the hallway that afternoon, the house empty except for silence and shadows, he felt something he hadn't felt before. Watched. He turned sharply. Nothing there. He checked the cameras. Offline. All of them. How? He reached for his phone. The battery had dropped from 90% to 1% in under 10 minutes. Drained. It didn't make sense. Unless someone was already in the house. Jake bolted for the front door. As he pulled it open, a package sat on the steps. No return address. No postage. Just his name, scrawled in handwriting he didn't recognize. He brought it inside. Carefully, like it might explode. Inside, a cassette tape, labeled, "Listen only if you're ready." No player in sight. But Jake knew where to find one. His dad kept an old stereo in the attic. He climbed the stairs. Dust. Cobwebs. Childhood memories. And then, a shadow passed by the window. Jake froze. The tape was in his hand. His heart thudded. He pressed play, and what he heard was his father's voice. Rob Reiner. Crying. Talking. Whispering something that didn't make sense. At first. Until it did. But what he said next would send Jake into a tailspin he'd never escape. And it all started with 4 simple words. He knows the truth. He knows the truth? Jake paused the tape. The attic was dead silent except for the faint hum of the old stereo. Dust danced in the rays of sunlight peeking through the slats. It smelled like old leather, forgotten scripts, and something else, something bitter, like burnt paper. His father's voice still echoed in his ears. Shaky, cracked, barely above a whisper. Who was he? Nick? Was that a warning? Or a confession? Jake pressed play again. The audio continued, but now the voice sounded calmer, more deliberate, like Rob had finally made peace with whatever he was hiding. I never meant to lie. Not to the kids. Not to Michelle. But some things, they bury you. They rot under your skin if you let them stay in the light. So I buried them. I did what I thought I had to. And if you're hearing this, Jake, then it's time. Time for what? Jake leaned forward. Every nerve in his body pulled tight, like piano wire. The tape continued. There's a drawer in my study. The far right. You'll know which one. It's locked for a reason. The key is inside Lena's copy of Wuthering Heights. Behind the jacket. Page 214. Jake didn't even stop to think. He was already halfway down the stairs. The study. The same place where he found the jewelry box. Jake stood at the bookshelf like a soldier on a mission. Scanned quickly. There it was, Wuthering Heights. A first edition. Rob's signature inside. Jake flipped to page 214. And there, pressed between the pages like a bookmark, was a small bronze key. He didn't waste a second. The far right drawer. Locked. Not anymore. The key clicked. The drawer slid open. And what was inside? Changed everything. There were letters. Dozens. All addressed to L. Written in Rob's handwriting. Some dated as far back as 1971. Jake read the first few lines of one. Lena, I had the dream again. You on the shore. The baby crying. I woke up gasping. Michelle doesn't know. She can't. I still see your eyes every time I close mine. I need to know, is he mine? Jake felt the wind leave his lungs. There was a child? Jake kept reading. Each letter painted a picture more complex than the last. Lena and Rob were together in secret. They had eloped in 1974, just as Rob's career began exploding. He had begged her to keep their relationship and their child quiet, terrified that any scandal would destroy his career. And she had, until she vanished. No phone call, no note. Nothing, just gone. But Rob hadn't stopped searching. Jake found receipts from private investigators, old newspaper clippings, a hospital bill in someone else's name. Then he found it, a crumpled envelope with a single photograph. A woman, Lena, holding a baby in her arms. The baby couldn't have been more than a year old. Jake stared at the baby's face. Brown eyes, dark curls. Something about the expression. It reminded him of Nick. But it wasn't Nick. He knew that for sure. This child was older. And then he noticed the scrawl on the back of the photo. Ethan, age 1, Portland, Oregon. Ethan? Jake whispered the name. His heartbeat thudded in his ears. Was Ethan the brother they never knew? Was he still alive? And if so, why hadn't Rob ever told them? Jake's mind raced with questions. How do you live your whole life without knowing your own blood? How does your father, your hero, keep something so monumental hidden? But more importantly, Was this the secret that got Rob and Michelle killed? Was someone trying to keep Ethan hidden? Or worse, find him? Jake dug deeper into the drawer. There was a manila folder marked legal. Inside were unsigned divorce papers, dated 1976, filed by Lena Roth. Jake's eyes narrowed. If Lena had filed for divorce, then she wasn't dead in 1976, despite what the PI had suggested. So what happened to her after that? Where did she go? And who was taking care of Ethan? Jake reached for another document. A check, made out to cash. Amount, $150,000. Date, June 1976. Memo, final arrangement. Final arrangement? Jake stared at the number. That was a lot of money in 1976. More than most people made in 5 years. And it was drawn from Rob's private account. Jake opened another letter. This one wasn't from Rob. It was from Lena, written in blue ink, tear stains smudging the ink. I can't do this anymore, Rob. You chose Hollywood. You chose silence. Ethan doesn't need your guilt. He needs peace. We're leaving. Don't try to find us. Don't try to play father after all these years. You had your chance, and you buried it. Goodbye. No signature. Just the word goodbye. Jake closed the letter, hands shaking. He was starting to get the picture. Rob had loved Lena, but fear and ambition tore them apart. Then came Michelle, and the family the world knew. But what if Rob never stopped searching for Ethan? What if he got close, too close? Was that what sparked everything? Had someone tried to silence Rob once and for all, just as he was on the verge of finding the truth? And if so, who? Jake glanced back at the locked drawer. Something caught his eye. The bottom looked uneven. He pressed it gently. A false bottom popped open. Inside, a small USB drive. Jake took it straight to his laptop. Plugged it in. Only one file. A video. He clicked play. The screen flickered. Then Rob appeared, sitting in this very room. Looking older. Tired, but resolute. If you're seeing this, then I'm gone. And if I'm gone, it wasn't an accident. I kept this a secret for too long. His name is Ethan. He's my son. I tried to find him, but someone didn't want me to. Jake froze. The video continued. There's someone close to us. Watching. Always watching. I thought it was paranoia. But then the letters started going missing. My phone would glitch. Michelle heard voices on the intercom system when no one was home. I thought maybe it was Nick at first. But now, I'm not sure. If something happens to me, Jake, protect your sister. And find your brother. The screen went black. Jake sat there, stunned. He had a brother. And he had a mission. But as he sat back in that leather chair, the sun setting outside the window, something caught his eye. Movement. On the security monitor near the door. Someone was outside. Not the police. Not Romy. Someone else. Watching the house. Standing still in the shadow of the hedges. Just watching. Jake leaned forward. But before he could get a better look, the screen went black. All of them. Someone didn't want him seeing. Someone knew he had found the drawer. The letters. The tape. The name. Ethan. And now, Jake had to ask the one question that kept echoing through his mind. Was Ethan still alive? And if he was he in danger? But what came next would not just lead Jake to Ethan. It would lead him into the heart of a family conspiracy so dark, so twisted, that even murder was only the beginning. Who was the woman in the photograph? Not the name. Not the rumor. Not the ghost story version whispered through sealed files and half-burned letters. The woman. The one smiling beside Rob Reiner on a beach no one remembered. The one whose face refused to leave Jake's mind. Because once you see a face like that, once you realize it's been erased on purpose, you can't unsee it. Jake didn't sleep that night. How could he? Every time he closed his eyes, the image floated back. The grainy photograph. The way Rob leaned slightly toward her, like he was afraid she might drift away if he let go. The wind tugging at her hair. The ring on her finger. The ring Jake was now carrying in his pocket like a curse. Who was she really? And why had the world been so determined to forget her? By sunrise, Jake had made a decision. He wasn't going to ask the police. He wasn't going to ask the studio insiders. He wasn't going to ask family friends who suddenly couldn't remember details from the 1970s. He was going to find the truth himself. And it started with the photograph. Jake drove across the city, past palm-lined streets and silent mansions, to a small, unmarked office tucked between a dry cleaner and a shuttered cafe. Inside worked an old-school archivist. Not the digital kind. The kind who remembered faces. Stories. The kind who still believed Hollywood was built as much on secrets as it was on talent. Jake slid the photo across the desk. The archivist stared at it for a long time. Too long. Then she leaned back slowly and said something that made Jake's stomach drop. I was wondering when this picture would resurface. Jake's pulse spiked. You recognize her? The woman nodded. Of course I do. Who is she? The archivist hesitated, then whispered the name, like it might hear her if she said it too loudly. Lena Roth. Jake already knew the name, but hearing it spoken out loud by someone who remembered her made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Tell me everything, Jake said. The archivist sighed. Lena wasn't just an actress. She was a problem. Jake frowned. A problem. For people who wanted everything neat, controlled, predictable. She stood up, walked to a filing cabinet that looked older than both of them, and pulled out a yellowed folder. Inside were headshots, magazine clippings, call sheets. Lena Roth had been everywhere in the early 1970s. Small roles, guest appearances, theater work, always on the edge of something big. She was talented, the archivist continued. But she didn't play the game. What game? The silence game. The compromise game. The don't ask questions game. Jake leaned forward. She was outspoken, smart. She asked for fair pay. She turned down roles she didn't believe in. And when she married Rob, quietly, off the books, it scared people. Who? Studios, agents, investors, anyone who saw Rob as an asset, not a human being. Jake felt a chill crawl up his spine. So they erased her? The archivist's eyes flicked to the door, then back to Jake. They tried. Here's what Jake learned over the next 2 hours. Lena Roth didn't disappear in 1976. She was pushed out, pressured, threatened. She'd been told, in no uncertain terms, that Rob Reiner's career depended on her silence, on her absence, on her willingness to vanish quietly. And when she didn't comply, things escalated. Roles dried up overnight. Her name was scrubbed from casting lists. Friends stopped returning her calls. And then, something worse. She came to me once, the archivist said softly, crying. Said someone had broken into her apartment. Not to steal, just to scare her. They left one thing behind. What? The archivist swallowed. A baby shoe. Jake's heart slammed against his ribs. Ethan. Jake drove home in a daze. The city felt unreal, like a movie set he no longer recognized. He kept thinking about the baby shoe, about the fear Lena must have felt, about the choice she was forced to make, stay and risk everything, or run and lose everything. And Rob? What had Rob done? The letters suggested guilt, regret, desperation. But guilt doesn't erase consequences. Jake pulled into the driveway of the Brentwood mansion and noticed something new. Fresh tire tracks. The police tape was still up. No one should have been there. His instincts screamed. He entered cautiously. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Then he heard it. A faint clicking sound. Like keys. Coming from the study. Jake's breath caught. He grabbed the nearest thing he could find, a heavy brass paperweight, and crept toward the sound. The study door was slightly open. He pushed it wider. Empty. No one there. But the desk drawer, the one with the false bottom, was open. Wide open. Someone had been there. Recently. Jake rushed to the desk. The letters were still there. The USB drive, gone. His chest tightened. Someone knew. Someone was watching. Someone was erasing the truth again. Jake didn't call the police. Not yet. Because now he understood something crucial. This wasn't just about murder. This was about containment. The same force that erased Lena Roth decades ago was still active. Still protecting something. Or someone. Jake sat down heavily in Rob's chair. And that's when he noticed it. The photograph. The one from the jewelry box. It was no longer just a beach wedding photo. There was something else in the background. Something Jake hadn't noticed before. He zoomed in on his phone. Far behind Rob and Lena, near the tree line. A figure. Out of focus. Standing alone. Watching. Jake's throat went dry. He zoomed in further. The man was tall. Broad-shouldered. Wearing a dark jacket despite the sunlight. And he was looking straight at the camera. At them. At Lena. At Rob. Like he was making sure they were never forgotten. Or never escaped. Jake stared at the image. Who was that? A friend? A witness? Or a threat? That night, Jake received an email. No sender. No subject. Just one line of text. She tried to run. It didn't end well. Attached was another photograph. Older. Blurry. Lena Roth. standing at a bus station, holding Ethan's hand. Date stamped, October 1976. Location, Portland, Oregon. Jake's breath shook. Ethan was real. He had survived, at least back then. But the email didn't stop there. Below the photo was a final line. You're closer than your father ever was. Be careful. Jake closed his laptop slowly. The truth was no longer buried. It was reaching out, and it was warning him. Somewhere out there, Ethan existed or had existed. And someone didn't want Jake finding him. Because if Ethan spoke, if the truth came out, it wouldn't just destroy a legacy. It would expose a machine that had been silencing people for decades, including, possibly, Rob and Michelle Reiner. Jake stood by the window, staring into the darkness outside. And for the first time, he wondered something terrifying. What if Nick wasn't the monster? What if Nick was just the last loose end? And what if the real danger was still out there, watching, waiting? But what Jake would uncover next, about Lena's disappearance, a sealed hospital record, and a name that should never have existed, would turn suspicion into certainty. And once that door opened, there would be no turning back. What happens when someone vanishes, but the world keeps going like they never existed? That's what haunted Jake as he sat alone in Rob Reiner's study, staring at the hospital form Romy had just texted him. She'd found it buried in a box of their mother Michelle's things, a sealed medical record dated 1976, the name Lena Roth scratched across the top in fading blue ink. The file wasn't supposed to exist, at least not anymore. It had been sealed, then erased, then, somehow, hidden in a house where it didn't belong. So why did Michelle have it? And more importantly, what did it prove? Jake took a deep breath and opened the scan. It was a hospital intake form. Patient, Lena Roth. Date, October 19th, 1976. Diagnosis, minor laceration, domestic incident. Admitted, emergency room. Notes, patient traveled from Los Angeles, accompanied by minor child. Refused to name companion or contact police. At the bottom was one more chilling line. Patient left before treatment was complete. Departed on foot. Discharge marked against medical advice. Jake swallowed hard. It was her, no doubt. And she had a child with her, Ethan. This wasn't just confirmation that Lena had survived after disappearing from the spotlight. It was confirmation she'd been running, bleeding, afraid, refusing help. Why? From whom? Jake sent the scan to his PI contact, then picked up the photo again. The one from the wedding. The figure in the background, still blurry, still watching. And that's when a horrifying thought crossed his mind. What if that man wasn't a stranger? What if he was the reason Lena ran? Let's rewind. You know Rob Reiner, but you don't know Lena Roth. Because Hollywood didn't want you to. She came to LA in 1969, bright-eyed, just 22. Got her first role 6 months later, a one-off appearance on Mannix. Then The Partridge Family. Then a minor recurring role on Love, American Style. Everyone said the same thing. Lena had something. Not just beauty. Presence. She wasn't acting. She was. But that made people nervous. Especially back then. The studios liked women they could mold. Control. Shut up and push forward when it suited them. Lena? She pushed back. She walked off a set once when a producer asked her to do a bikini scene she hadn't agreed to. They told her she'd never work again. 2 weeks later, she was on a magazine cover. The rebel starlet of the new decade. And that's when she met Rob. Rob was newly divorced. Young. Hungry. On the cusp of a breakout. They met at a small industry dinner. Lena wasn't even supposed to be there. She came as someone's plus one. But that night changed everything. Jake found the letters to prove it. One, dated May 1972. Lena, I don't remember the meal. I don't remember who else was there. I just remember you. The way you said you hated scripts that treated women like accessories. I've never met anyone who made me feel like I was seen. From there, it escalated fast. By 1973, they were living together, quietly. By 1974, they'd married. Secretly. No guests. Just the beach. Just them. Jake had no idea this part of his father's life even existed. But the documents didn't lie. And neither did the pain in Lena's letters. Because the story didn't end with marriage. It barely started there. Within 6 months, Lena was pregnant. And that's when the pressure came. Rob's career exploded. All in the family. Film offers. Public appearances. And Lena? Lena was told to disappear. Not by Rob, at least not at first, but by everyone around him. managers, studio executives, lawyers. They saw Lena as a liability, an unknown, a woman with opinions. And worse, she was now carrying the child of one of the most valuable names in television. Jake found a note on legal stationery and signed, tucked inside the same folder as the hospital record. If she won't sign the agreement, we'll have to find another way. This can't go public. The baby complicates things. That line hit Jake like a punch in the gut. The baby complicates things. That baby was his brother, Ethan. Jake started connecting dots faster now. Lena had the baby, but she was being erased systematically. Jobs dried up. She was dropped by her agency. One photographer who tried to do a profile on her was later fired. And then came the threats. Jake now had 2 anonymous notes, sent months apart, both with no return address. One said, "You'll end up buried in a tabloid scandal, if you're lucky." The other, "Leave LA and take your bastard with you." Last warning, Lena did leave. But not before trying, desperately, to speak with Rob. Letters poured in. Dozens. Jake found them unopened. Never read. All addressed to a studio mailbox Rob had long since abandoned. She begged him to meet. To talk. To just acknowledge Ethan. But he didn't. Or couldn't. And that's when something in Lena broke. The final letter from her, dated January 1977, was the one that shook Jake most. "I hope you're proud. I changed my name. I changed his name. You don't get to know who we are now. You don't deserve to. This is the last time I'll ever write you. If Ethan asks about you, I'll tell him nothing. Nothing is safer than the truth. Nothing is safer than the truth." But the truth? The truth had been buried for 50 years. Until now. Jake sat back, numb. How many people knew? How many helped hide it? And why did Michelle, his stepmother, have the hospital record? Was she helping Lena? Or keeping her quiet? Jake had no answers. But one thing was clear. Lena Roth had tried to survive. She had tried to protect her child. And someone had tried just as hard to silence her. Then came the twist Jake didn't see coming. The private investigator texted him again. "Check this." Attached was a screenshot. A record of a birth certificate filed under a different name. But the mother? Lena Roth. The child? Ethan Marcus Caldwell. Born October 11th, 1974. And the father? Left blank. No Reiner. No Rob. Nothing. The certificate had been amended in 1982. Changed. Sealed. New name assigned. The original erased from the system. Jake stared at it. His brother had become a ghost. And then, something else. A second message. Same number. Last known location. 4 months ago. Another file. A photo. A man, late 40s. Slight resemblance to Rob. Working at a food co-op in Eugene, Oregon. Name, Ethan Caldwell. Jake's chest tightened. He was alive. After all this time. He was alive. But now came the real question. Did Ethan know? Did he know who he was? Did he know what Rob had done? Did he know about Jake? Or worse? Did he know something so dangerous, something worth killing over, that someone still wanted him silenced? Because the moment Jake opened that birth certificate, the moment he saw his brother's name, he realized something terrifying. Someone else could be watching Ethan, too. And if they were willing to kill Rob and Michelle to keep the past hidden, then Ethan was next. But what Jake would discover next? When he tracked Ethan down and uncovered a letter meant for the son who never knew he had a father, would change everything. And this time, there would be no going back. Is it worse to be forgotten or hidden? Jake Reiner couldn't stop asking himself that as he stood on the edge of a gravel parking lot in Eugene, Oregon, staring at the entrance to a small food co-op, his pulse pounding like a war drum. He had driven nearly 16 hours straight, barely stopping to eat or sleep. The roads had blurred, the highway lights flickering like memories he couldn't grasp. But now he was here. And just inside that building, if the PI's intel was right, was Ethan Marcus Caldwell. The brother he'd never met. The son Rob Reiner never claimed. The man who, according to every document Jake had uncovered, should not exist. Jake took a shaky breath and stepped inside. The place was cozy, local, the kind of place that sold lavender honey and handwritten coupons. At first, he didn't see anyone resembling the photo. Then, behind the counter, restocking a shelf of herbal teas, there he was. Thicker beard, slightly older than the photo, but unmistakable. He looked normal, not dangerous, not mysterious, just a man living his life. Jake approached slowly. "Hey, he said, voice cracking. Excuse me. Ethan. The man turned. Polite. Confused. Then cautious. I go by Marcus now, he said. Of course. New life. New name. Jake nodded. Sorry. I didn't mean to. I just... He hesitated. What do you even say? I'm Jake. Jake Reiner. Pause. And then, the air shifted. Ethan froze. His lips parted, but no sound came out. He stared. Not with fear. With something else. Recognition? Or something deeper. Regret? He put down the box he was holding. I knew you'd come eventually, he said. Jake blinked. You knew? Ethan nodded slowly. I always figured someone would. Not sure I thought it'd be you. Wait. How long have you known? Ethan sighed. My mother told me when I was 17. Not everything. Just enough. About Rob. He nodded. She said he was famous. Said he made a choice. Said it was safer this way. Jake stared at him. Did you ever try to reach out? Ethan looked down. I did. Once. Mailed a letter to one of his offices. Never heard back. Thought it was his answer. Jake swallowed hard. He never got it. There was a pause. Then Ethan laughed softly. That makes sense. The two men sat down in the back room of the co-op. Jake told him everything. The jewelry box. The letters. The hidden drawer. The hospital record. The video. Everything. And Ethan listened. In silence. Then he stood and walked to an old filing cabinet. He opened the bottom drawer. Pulled out a dusty envelope. I wasn't sure what to do with this, he said, handing it to Jake. Jake opened it. Inside was a single page. Handwritten. The same scrawled handwriting he'd seen in other letters. It was Rob's. Dated 3 years ago. It read, Ethan, I don't know if this will ever reach you. But if it does, I want you to know, I'm sorry. For the silence. For the fear. For not being the man I should have been. I was young. I was scared. But that's not an excuse. You had a right to know me. And I had a duty to know you. If there's anything left of us, anything to salvage, I hope someday you'll forgive me. Dad. Jake's throat tightened. Ethan stared at the floor. I got it from a woman, he said. She came into the store one day. Didn't give her name. Just handed it to me and walked out. Jake looked up sharply. What did she look like? Ethan thought. Mid-60s, maybe. Gray streak in her hair. Looked tired. Could it have been Michelle? Delivering a message Rob never could? Jake's mind spun. But Ethan wasn't done. She also gave me this. He opened a small wooden box and pulled out a ring. The same ring Jake had found in Rob's hidden jewelry box. Only this one was slightly different. The engraving on the inside read, To E, from R, forgive me. Jake sat back, stunned. Rob had reached out. Quietly. Indirectly. Maybe too late. But he tried. Now the question was, who else knew? And who had tried to stop it? Jake remembered the threatening email. The figure watching the house. The erased files. The USB drive that vanished from Rob's study. Someone had been working hard to make sure Ethan stayed hidden. Or stayed silent. And now Jake had to ask the most terrifying question yet. Did someone know Ethan had the letter? And if so, was Ethan next? Jake and Ethan talked late into the night. They shared memories, though few overlapped. They laughed awkwardly. They argued. They cried. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time, Jake understood something. Rob didn't just have a secret child. He had a second family, even if it was one he never truly got to know. And that second family, it was now in serious danger. Because the closer Jake got to the truth, the more dangerous things became. The next morning, Jake woke up to find Ethan gone. His phone rang moments later. Blocked number. He answered. The voice on the other end was low. Cold. You should have stayed away. Click. The line went dead. Jake's heart pounded. He called Ethan. No answer. Texted. Nothing. He ran out to the street. Ethan's car was gone. Vanished. No note. No message. No sign of struggle. Just gone. Had he run? Or had someone taken him? Jake didn't know. But one thing was certain. The secret Ethan carried, the life he lived in silence, had just been ripped open. And the people who'd worked for decades to keep that door shut were back. Jake drove back to LA in a storm of panic. He didn't sleep. Didn't eat. Just played Rob's video over and over in his mind. If anything happens to me, Jake, protect your sister. And find your brother. He'd done both. Now one was missing. And the other, Romy, could be next. Because if Ethan's life had been erased once, it could be done again. Only this time, it might be permanent. but what Jake would find waiting for him when he got home. An anonymous package containing a blood-stained piece of fabric and a photo of Ethan bound and gagged would push him into a dangerous game of cat and mouse, where every move forward brought him closer to a truth someone was willing to kill for. And once he opened that package, the war truly began. What do you do when your brother disappears, and all that's left behind is a warning? Jake Reiner stood in his kitchen, the torn cardboard box still open on the counter. Inside it, a piece of fabric soaked in something dark, thick, dried at the edges. Blood? He didn't want to believe it, but it smelled metallic. It looked real. And worse, taped to the inside of the box was a photo. Ethan, hands tied, eyes swollen, duct tape across his mouth. And behind him, a blank, concrete wall. No windows. No furniture. Just emptiness. And a date, scrawled in red marker at the bottom of the image. If you want him alive, stop digging. Jake's legs gave out. He dropped into the nearest chair, the weight of the truth crashing into his chest like a battering ram. This wasn't just a cover-up anymore. It was a hostage situation. Someone had Ethan. Someone knew Jake had found him. And now, they were sending a message. Crystal clear. Back off, or Ethan dies. But Jake wasn't about to back off. He was about to go deeper. And the next name on his list? Nick. His brother. The accused. The broken. The one everyone blamed for the murder of Rob and Michelle. Jake had avoided him, even convinced himself Nick was incapable of such brutality. But now he needed answers. Because whether Nick was a killer or not, he might still hold the key to everything. Jake drove to the LA County Jail, his mind spinning. What if Nick had found out about Ethan? What if he'd known all along? What if the rage, the spiraling, the instability, all came from that? From the feeling of being second, forgotten, replaced. The room was cold. Nick sat behind a plexiglass wall. He looked tired, pale, like a man who'd been dragged through hell and left there. Jake picked up the phone. Nick just stared, silent. Jake spoke first. I found him. Nick blinked. Found who? Ethan. The name landed like a bomb. Nick's eyes didn't widen. He didn't flinch. He just looked defeated. You shouldn't have. Why? Nick leaned forward, pressing the receiver tighter to his ear. Because it doesn't end well. Jake's grip on the phone tightened. Nick, I need the truth. Now. No games. No riddles. Did you know about him? Nick exhaled slowly. I didn't, not at first. But then I started finding things. Letters. Old photos Dad hid in a box in the attic. Stuff Michelle tried to burn. Jake's stomach turned. She knew too. Nick nodded. She knew everything. But she kept quiet. Said it was better that way. Jake leaned in. What happened, Nick? Why did you kill them? Nick's eyes shot up. Sharp. Angry. I didn't. Then who did? Nick hesitated. Then whispered. I don't know, but they're watching. Jake froze. They? Nick nodded slowly. You don't understand what Dad got himself involved in. He tried to go public years ago. Write a memoir. Include the truth. But every time, he'd stop. Said there were too many people with too much to lose. Jake's pulse raced. What kind of people? Nick's voice dropped to a whisper. Old studio heads. Private investors. Political names. People who paid millions to control narratives. Jake frowned. This is about Ethan? Nick nodded again. Ethan's not just a lost kid. He's a living threat to the lie they built. Rob Reiner wasn't just a filmmaker. He was part of a machine. A legacy. Jake leaned forward. You think they killed Dad? Nick's eyes filled with something terrifying. Not anger. Not sadness. Certainty. I know they did. Jake stared through the glass, struggling to breathe. Nick looked different now. Not just broken, but hunted. They came for me, Nick whispered. After that night, I don't remember much. Just flashes. Noise. Pain. Then I woke up in the guest house, covered in blood. You're saying you were set up? Nick nodded. And I think they drugged me. I failed the talk screen. But that test never showed up in court. Jake's thoughts whirled. This is insane. Nick smiled weakly. Now you're starting to get it. Jake left the jail with his mind on fire. Who were they? Who had this kind of reach? Enough to silence Rob. Frame Nick. Erase Lena. Kidnap Ethan. Was this bigger than a family secret? Was it institutional? Jake's thoughts were interrupted by his phone buzzing. Unknown number. He answered. The voice on the other end was calm. Measured. You have 1 week to forget everything. Or we send Ethan back in pieces. Click. No number. No trace. Jake's blood ran cold. This was no longer a mystery. It was a war, and someone had just drawn a line in the sand. Jake returned home and tore through every file he had on Rob's connections, his financials, foundation donors, board seats, political affiliations. One name kept popping up: Harlan Voss, old money producer, reclusive, owner of a shell company that funded several of Rob's early films, tied to hush-hush settlements, obscure lawsuits, sealed NDAs, and more chilling, Voss had been linked to another actress' disappearance in 1981. Unproven, unspoken, buried. Jake clicked open the last file his PI had sent him before vanishing. A blurry security photo from the co-op parking lot. A man stepping out of a black SUV, watching Ethan. Jake zoomed in. His heart stopped. It was Harlan Voss. Older, thinner, but unmistakable. And standing next to him, a woman, gray streak in her hair. Jake recognized her immediately. Michelle. But she was dead, right? Then how was she standing in that parking lot? Alive, just days before Ethan was taken. Jake's breath caught. Was the body in the house really Michelle's? Or had someone else died that night? Had he been played? Had the murder been staged? The questions were piling up faster than answers. But one thing was now clear. Michelle wasn't just part of the secret. She might have been protecting it. And if she was alive, she might be the only person who knew where Ethan was. Or worse, she might be the one who helped take him. But what Jake would uncover next, when he broke into Michelle's private storage unit and found a map, a burner phone, and a file labeled EMC, contingency plan, would reveal a side of his stepmother that would shatter every belief he'd ever had about the woman who helped raise him. And what came after would make betrayal feel like mercy. How do you process the idea that the woman who helped raise you, loved you, kissed your scraped knees, tucked you into bed, might be the architect of your family's destruction? Jake Reiner didn't know what to believe anymore, but he knew where to go next. Michelle's storage unit. He remembered it from years ago, something she'd mentioned in passing. A private space in a nondescript facility just outside Malibu. She called it her memories box, a place where she kept old costumes, scripts, mementos, harmless stuff. But that was before everything. Before the murders. Before Ethan. Before the photograph. Before the call. Before the bloodstained box. Now, it was no longer a place of memories. It was a crime scene waiting to be discovered. Jake rented a van and pulled up to the facility just after 10 p.m. The place was quiet, gated, secure, but Jake had come prepared. Rob's old keys, Michelle's name, a copied access code from an old email Jake found in her digital trash. Unit 1137. He held his breath and rolled up the shutter. What he saw inside didn't look like keepsakes. It looked like a war room. Stacks of boxes, a desk, filing cabinets, a wall covered in maps and photos, like something out of a conspiracy thriller. Photos of Jake, photos of Romy, photos of Ethan, marked, dated, tracked. One image showed Ethan outside his workplace in Eugene. Another, blurry but unmistakable, was of him standing with a woman Jake didn't recognize. Notes beside it read, unverified, potential asset, friendly. And then Jake saw the biggest red flag of all. A folder titled EMC, Contingency Plan. Ethan Marcus Caldwell. Jake opened it with shaking hands. Inside were 3 items. A printed map, marked with pins and coordinates. One location circled in bold red in the outskirts of Santa Cruz. A prepaid burner phone with a dead battery. A handwritten letter. The envelope was unsealed. On the front, to be delivered in the event of exposure. Jake opened the letter. It was from Michelle. If you're reading this, something went wrong. We weren't supposed to kill Rob. That was never the plan. We were supposed to contain the story, control the fallout, make sure Ethan stayed hidden. But he got too close. The day he opened that box, I knew the clock had started. Harlan said it was still salvageable, but I didn't agree. Not anymore. Not when I saw how far Jake was willing to go. Jake stopped reading. His ears buzzed. She was watching him. All this time, he continued. I loved Rob. But love doesn't erase mistakes. And his biggest one wasn't cheating or hiding Lena. It was Ethan. Because Ethan is proof. Proof of how deep this goes. Proof that there was a system, a machine, built to protect reputations and destroy dissent. And if Ethan speaks, everything burns. So I made a choice. Not out of hate. Out of necessity. Jake could barely breathe. She went on. Nick was never supposed to be the scapegoat. They drugged him. Harland arranged it. I was supposed to intervene, delay it. But I was too late. She signed it with a single word. Forgive me. Jake sat back in the plastic chair, shaking. Forgive her? She helped orchestrate the silencing of a son. She helped cover up a murder. And now Ethan was gone. Missing. Possibly bleeding out in a concrete room, while forgive me echoed like a knife in Jake's ears. He grabbed the burner phone, plugged it in using his car's charger, and waited. It powered on. One message. From Harlan Voss. Short. Cold. Package secured. Target relocated. Do not respond. Date. 2 days ago. Jake stared at the screen. His pulse drummed. The circled location on the map, it wasn't random. It was the last place Michelle had tracked Ethan before the abduction. A storage facility near Santa Cruz. Remote. Unregulated. Private. Jake didn't wait. He packed the map, the phone, the letter, and drove. 3 hours later, he arrived at a rusted facility off a backroad highway. The moon hung low. Fog rolled in over the trees. The storage units were spaced far apart. No cameras. No lights. Just metal boxes under a black sky. Jake matched the map's coordinates. Unit 6A. He crept closer, heart pounding. A faint sound from inside. Scraping? Movement? He raised the crowbar he brought, just in case, and cracked the door open. The metallic clang echoed like a gunshot. Inside, darkness. Then, movement. A foot shuffled. Then a whisper. Jake. He froze. Ethan. And then he saw him. Bound. Bruised. Alive. But barely. Jake rushed in, ripped off the tape, cut through the restraints. Ethan collapsed into his arms. You came, he whispered. I never left, Jake said. But before they could even step outside, a red dot appeared on Ethan's chest. Then another on Jake's shoulder. Snipers. Jake grabbed Ethan and dove back inside. Outside, a voice called out over a loudspeaker. Return the package. Or die with him. This wasn't a cover-up anymore. This was an assassination mission. Jake wasn't just dealing with secrets. He was fighting an enemy that had planned every step, controlled every move, watched every breath. And now, he had one shot to save his brother and bring down the entire empire that tried to erase him. But what Jake would do next? When he discovered a hidden camera inside the storage unit, still recording and feeding to a live server titled Asset Lock, Operation Reiner, would force him to confront the terrifying truth. This wasn't just about Ethan. They were watching everything. And Jake was already in their crosshairs. Jake Reiner froze. The camera was small, no bigger than a button, tucked into the metal ceiling corner of the unit. Nearly invisible, unless you were looking for it. But now that he saw it, he couldn't unsee it. It was live, still blinking red, still recording, still watching, feeding into a system with a chilling name. Asset Lock, Operation Reiner. He followed the wire to a small, tamper-proof black box near the wall. Beside it, a mobile router. Connected. Active. They weren't just surveilling Ethan. They were surveilling Jake. Ethan groaned behind him, trying to sit up. Jake spun around, yanked the camera cord, and crushed the box underfoot. Too late. The damage was done. They knew Jake had found him. They knew he was still alive. And now, they'd escalate. Jake helped Ethan to his feet. We have to go? Now. Ethan was dazed, bleeding from a cut above his eyebrow, ribs swollen and discolored. I can walk, he grunted, though it was clearly a lie. Jake half-carried him to the van, threw open the side door, and helped him inside. As he slammed the door shut, a gunshot rang out. The side mirror exploded. Jake ducked, shoved the keys into the ignition, and peeled off into the night. No headlights. No phone. No GPS. Just instinct. For the next 2 hours, Jake drove without a word. Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness. They finally pulled off the road into a secluded state park, where Jake parked behind a thicket of trees and killed the engine. The silence was deafening. Jake sat there, breathing like a man who'd just outrun a bomb. Ethan stirred. You saw it, didn't you? He rasped. Jake turned. The camera? Ethan nodded. It's part of the protocol. I think they call it the archive. Jake frowned. What the hell is that? Ethan grimaced, wincing as he spoke. It's everything. Family connections. Scandals. Illegitimate kids. Affairs. Bribes. NDAs. The people who built Hollywood? They kept everything. They never delete. They just hide. Jake leaned forward. Why? Ethan looked up, and the words came slow. Haunting. Because the people who control the stories control the power. And the Reiners weren't just actors and directors. We were gatekeepers, whether we knew it or not. The archive. Jake had heard whispers of it once. A fabled blackmail vault allegedly kept by old studio moguls. Most people thought it was a myth. But now, he was hearing it from someone who had been locked inside the machine. What else do you know? Jake asked. Ethan hesitated. There's a file. On me. On you. On Rob. On Lena. Jake's pulse spiked. Where? Ethan looked him dead in the eye. Buried beneath the Brentwood house. Jake blinked. What? Rob knew. I think he found part of it. That's why they killed him. Jake sat back, stunned. You're saying, what, there's a vault? A real one? Ethan nodded. Not a bank vault. A sub-basement. Designed in the 60s. Never put on any blueprints. Only people with clearance knew it existed. Jake's voice dropped. And you think Dad found it? I know he did. And I think he left a piece of it for you. Jake stared out the window, the truth punching through like lightning. The jewelry box. The letters. The ring. It had all been part of a trail. Rob hadn't just been hiding guilt. He'd been leaving clues. Breadcrumbs. Leading to the one place no one would ever look. Home.